63rd edition of the roll call.
Daniel Krim,
Present.
Jen Hanks,
Here, present.
Kevin Hayes,
Here.
Estella Hollander,
Here.
Kai Kelly,
Here.
Sam Meyer,
I'm here.
Valerie Pyatt is absent. Martin Ince, I'm here. Carlton Johnson,
Here.
Chris Fair,
Here.
Lieutenant Rube,
Kevin Sargent, yes.
Kevin Sergeant, and Adam Williams. Okay.
Any announcements from BAC members? Okay. How's your knee doing?
Good. 6 weeks today, so, and I rode my bike, so
Hey.
all good.
Cool. Anything else, guys?
I visited my brother and sister-in-law in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I don't know if you've looked at their bike lanes recently. They are very nice. They have some full protected intersections at some of the extremely non-standard intersections that you see in a city that old. So they have painted like green lanes to help you as a bicyclist figure out where you are supposed to go, but also curb protection and a grade separated path through some of the more complicated intersections. Plus all the bicycles at the major intersections, or at least the ones I walk past, have their own light. That's like a green bike, yellow bike, red bike that tells you when you can go, and they get to go ahead of the cars. And the city of Cambridge has outlawed right turns on red. So
Wow.
like, this is great.
You need any pictures?
No, I should have done that. I didn't do that. Sorry.
What's the population of Cambridge?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's actually like Cambridge, Somerville is comparable to Flagstaff, I think,
Huh.
but I would have to look at that. But it's really, really nice. And it's all within the past like 10, 15 years that they've made those improvements. And there were a huge number of people bicycling.
Have you been to Cambridge
Yeah.
previous
Still
to?
there. Mhm. Yeah, so, and graduated in 2012, and none of that was in place.
Yeah, that's how it always works.
Yeah.
So wait until you come back to Flagstaff after you leave.
Yeah, but no right on red. I had not heard of cities doing that. Other people probably have, but that's awesome.
Great idea.
Yeah, I
hadn't
love
heard
it. That's most of the conflict at intersections for pedestrians and cyclists, so.
Had you heard of that, Martin? Outlawing right on red?
Oh, yes.
Have we looked at that? In any kind of,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been out there as an option. There's also like conditional restrictions on right on red as well.
it's like don't hit a bike.
Well, I mean, that's one version is like when somebody presses the pedestrian call button, that a light comes on, that restriction, right, turns on red. There could be a sign when no right turns on red when pedestrians or bikes are present. At the signals along 66, there's a, when the train preempts the
Yep,
intersection,
I've seen that.
right turn on red. I'm still waiting for to see somebody actually comply with it.
Follow it, exactly.
One of the ongoing challenges with like those signs is that the sign is typically, like if you're facing forward as a driver, the sign is typically up here on the signal pole. And drivers making a right turn are almost universally attentive this way for traffic. And so you kind of got that conflict of what you want people to see and where they're actually looking. Prohibiting right turns on red is, more universal and consistent in that manner.
Yeah, and then everybody knows what the rules are.
Yeah.
But you
I
got,
have a question. Is that a city rule? Like for an ADOT road, could we still do right on red, or would like that not be allowed on an ADOT road?
I think they would have jurisdiction. They would have to decide to do that.
Right.
The
So
city-
even if it's a city rule, it's still, we'd have to go from a state perspective to change on ADOT roads.
And Sam, was it posted at individual intersections? But most of that you saw,
Yeah.
all the ones that you saw, because it could be by intersection too. It could just say no
Yes.
right turn on.
All the ones I saw, and my brother said it was a relatively recent thing that the city did to change. There's been other cities in the area that have done it. I'm not certain how people felt about it. I don't know, but they did make that law. So it was very nice.
So how does jurisdiction work then when it's like an intersection of an ADOT road and a city road? So say like Ponderosa Parkway turning onto Route 66. Like,
Yeah, like on the side.
so if
street,
you had like a
it's not
conditional no right on red or something. At an intersection like that, like they're turning right on Route 66.
I think you're talking about where it's an ADOT road that intersects with a city street. I think they can keep jurisdiction over the whole intersection, so the four legs
Okay.
and our control units like back of that. Yeah.
Cool. Any public comments? Do we have any public?
I don't have any comments, no.
No comments? No, this morning. And what's your name, sir?
Sway's good?
Sway's good.
Sway's good, yes, sir.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Did anybody get a chance to read the minutes?
I did.
I have not had a chance to read them.
I mean, I did also.
You also
Yeah.
read them. I have not had a chance to read them, but I could be persuaded to vote on them. I probably shouldn't make a motion if I didn't read them.
I make a motion to approve minutes.
I'll second that. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna be that person. It said I was there and I was not there. So I guess with that change, then I approve.
Can we still approve them even though she wasn't there?
But you can like, with that amendment, that you can approve of.
Yeah. Do we need a new motion?
Make a motion. Minutes with that change.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
I
I think the ayes have it. New business, signal detection and operations for bicycles.
Yes,
Is this,
this is what we were talking
Okay.
about. Yes, yes. So. Yeah,
did you make a presentation?
I did.
Wow. Does he set up the broadcast?
We shall see.
Was this the presentation linked on the agenda?
Yes.
Very. I looked at it.
All right. Yeah, so Daniel and I talked a little bit, and I just wanted to give you guys some updates on some solutions I've come up with intersections for traffic that I've been doing kind of over the years. So I'm going to go through this super quick, and if you've got any questions, just kind of stop. As you all know, for intersections, kind of in the old days, the traffic lights were all kind of timed with numbers, right? So downtown flag is a good example because they're still timed that way. So a lot of crosswalks could turn on automatically. And actually downtown is a great example where the crosswalks turn on already automatically. So they have those press buttons, but they don't actually work, is my understanding, is that they're just there to press, but the lights will always turn. When the light turns green, the crosswalk comes on.
I don't believe there are any push buttons downtown.
There are some.
66 in San Francisco is probably because it's ADOT right away. You
Oh,
have.
anything on Humphreys
Those
or
work.
66 or.
Are they?
Those are
I thought there were lights there, no?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, anything along Humphreys or 66 is ADOT jurisdiction that will start.
It's ADOT.
They all start with push buttons.
Yeah,
So-
right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
those are operational
Why
push
does that
buttons?
one?
Yes,
Okay.
they still function as such.
So
The newer version.
in the new way, right, what we see mostly around town, and I made this up, right? And this is at a 10,000 views. So the technical people will be like, oh, this is not actually, but the idea is still the same, right? I call these smart streetlights. If you look at that street light above, there's a camera above. And that camera is designed basically just to count vehicles, right? And so what it allows you to do in an intersection is if you set your intersection on and a car pulls up, the camera sees that car pulls up and will add time to the green light. so that the green lights that you run in an intersection are fluid and not set by time, right? By a certain number. So as cars pull up, that green light can expand up until it reaches its max point, right? And so what that kind of allows it to do is it allows the green light to be flexible and work in real time. It improves your vehicular traffic around the areas. And that's also why you'll see around town, most of the crosswalks are set to do not walk. Because in this smart streetlight section, when you're not sure how long the light's gonna go, you can't just turn the crosswalk on because it can interfere with the vehicular traffic, which I'll kind of talk about as we get down in the road here, right? And really, those smart street lights give a concern, right, for what I call bike paths at intersections, right? Those crosswalks are set to do not walk, right, until the button's pressed. On the crosswalks around town or on our bike paths around town that hit those intersections, as you all know, you have to stop and press the button or you have to run it, right? That's usually what most people do, right? It interferes with the biker experience. And I'll show this related to like Route 66 bike path and the 4th Street bike path as examples. So on this one, this is Route 66 in Steve. I'm very familiar with this one, right? I go all the time. You go down that route right there. That light's green. The crosswalk path is set to do not walk, right? So when you hit that road and it's green, you have to stop. You press the button. You have to sit and watch that green light. You have to watch it turn yellow. You have to watch it turn red. Then you have to watch everyone go again to wait for the green to happen again to crosswalk to go, right? So it is cumbersome. It interferes with the bike experience, right? But balancing bike improvements with traffic flow efficiency, and this is where I've heard about this from the traffic engineers, and so I hope I've documented this appropriately. But as you know, the traffic engineers, they configure their streets and their street lights, and they're graded on how vehicular time between intersections happen, right? The city is graded on how well their traffic lights handle traffic intersections, right? So if you have times within an intersection area that can beat up, you can get graded on it. So as a result, adjusting intersection timings can be a very complex and time-consuming process. Daniel, you were going to say something?
On the previous slide, are you riding on the sidewalk? On the Fudge Trail? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
that's a bike trail.
it is.
Correct. Yeah, because if you're in the street, right?
You got a green light.
You got a green light, you can go. It's about having to go to that crosswalk, which is a bike path,
Mhm.
that whole way to make
It
that
is.
cross, right? So, and that's where, as I look at that, this is where we're moving for this whole city, right? We're trying to get outside those little paths around there. So we'll be going to these bike paths that will be going to these intersections in the future, right? So anyway, understanding again how important the configuration of these smart intersections are, small changes can have a significant impact, positive or negative, right? So in other words, if I increase a time for a crosswalk to happen at this intersection and it adds 7 to 8 seconds to that light, where it takes 7 to 8 seconds for the next light to go, you could negatively impact the grade that the city would see for its traffic patterns. So it's not something you can just simply go in and say, hey, we're going to make everything set to walk by default, because you can have impacts on traffic, right? So it's bigger than that. It's a bigger breadbox than that. And again, this is where I'm giving Martin, Jeff Bauman, and the transportation engineers a lot of credit, and I want to thank them. Before I was in this committee, I was on the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance. I was the team lead for the Bike Advisory Council, and I was working on this, and they helped me and met with me on their own to help me understand the implications of some of the requests we were making. So they helped me really understand some of it. And I can say, and you guys have seen this, that they indeed have shown me they want to make everything that they can do to help the bike experience, right? They really do want to work towards doing that, but there are limitations in what you can do, right? So I have found what I call some small adjustments that I think can happen, and I've actually done, to changes in traffic light patterns without impacting that city stuff, right? And I'm going to talk about one today. Whoops, I went the wrong way. But to do that, I have two geek things I got to talk about here. So first, we're going to talk about the walk signals, right? So this is called rest and walk at the top, rest and don't walk at the bottom. If that green light, that's your green light that happens there at the very beginning here, right? The green happens, it turns yellow and then turns to red. In most of our smart situations, right? This turns green to yellow to red, and we're stuck here on this steady at the bottom, don't walk, right? What they talk about in this regard is when you turn this light on, you press the walk, this signal of walk is, or at least this one down at the bottom, the signal of walk stays on walk for as long as it takes to cross the intersection. And that's a math number that they determine at each light. So I don't know the details in it, right? But the goal is, and the argument could also be, I've seen some that are going faster than they should be because they go faster than the pedestrian can take to cross them, but we won't even get into that. But
3.5 feet per second.
is it it's 3.5 feet per second? Okay, all right. So yeah, great. So when we talk about walk in rest versus what they call walk in don't rest, right? In walk in rest, for as long as that green goes, and there's a certain amount of time that the flashing has to happen where it either counts down and blinks at you, right? In the walk in rest, it stays on walk as long as it can until it starts to blink and flash and go from there. At the bottom one, walk and don't rest, it says it puts it on the bare minimum that it needs to cross the street. Then it starts its flashing and then it turns to don't walk, even though the green is still green. And so what I found in some research, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that second one, the walk period would be 7 seconds is the standard.
The 7 seconds is the standard.
Can I ask some questions on this one?
Sure.
So what is this 2 and this 6?
Well, so here's what I'll say to you. As I use this screen to talk about that default, what I'm going to give you is on the next slide is a link to where this document is, because I don't know what that
Okay.
star means, but you can look it up and I can show you where it is. But I just wanted you guys to see it related to the walk signs and the time within them.
And then my question is, maybe this is for Martin. Does it turn to a walk signal as soon as the light turns green, or is there a delay there?
If you press the button, as soon, and it really actually, it's a smart street light, so it really depends on the light. Because what I've also learned is each light is programmed different for how it delays and goes. So we've had situations, I think Martin, a couple weeks ago, where we saw like on, what's the one that's by the Starbucks and Route 66?
The Catholic Church. Up at
Yeah, at the church, Ponderosa, right? In Ponderosa, you'll notice that the street that goes towards the mall, that crosswalk turns on, it feels like it turns on later on the other side, but it's waiting for a trail for something else that makes it. Remember when you were talking about that in the past, we were like, when you go up towards the city, you press the button, this light turns green, and that the crosswalk doesn't happen for almost 2 seconds afterwards. And I think it's because the other crosswalk hasn't quite gone yet. And then when it goes, the other one goes together, if that makes sense. So it's like at each intersection, there are times on all of that. So it's a really complicated situation in each
Yeah,
one.
I've noticed that, like,
Yeah.
sometimes the light will turn green, but it's not a walk signal yet.
Yeah,
And then it'll-
exactly, right. And so it's a complicated deal on all of it, right? But the article that I'll show you the next, one of the things is if, increasing walk, one of the stats I liked in this article I took it from, it says maximizing the length of walk interval reduces pedestrian delay, improves pedestrian compliance, makes crossing accessible to slower pedestrians with no discernible impact on vehicular traffic. And it makes sense because what you've done is you haven't changed the green light. All you've done is allowed that walk to happen within the section of that green light, right? And so if you are interested, I put the link to this article in here. It's from the National Cooperative Highway Research Program. And I think I saved it here. And the article is called Traffic Signal Design and Operations Strategies. It is a 441-page technical document. So it has a
For
lot.
non-motorized users.
Yeah, but for non-motorized users, there's an entirely cool section on just pedestrian stuff in here. And the stats for them are crazy, like really good, the really good stats on it. So I found it very interesting, huh?
What's the date of that document?
2019 and 20. As well, another technical thing we want to talk about real quick before I can show you the solution is primary and secondary intersections, right? At a four-way intersection, some lights, those smart lights, are configured where a street is set as primary and the opposite is set as secondary, right? The primary stays green, and you see this a lot at night, right? The primary stays green until a car pulls up to the secondary. The smart camera reads the lights there, it starts the countdown, it turns the light to yellow and allows the thing to go. And then when that car's gone, it then goes back and it rests at the primary intersection, right? So a good example of that is this next slide here. I keep having to move my camera, sorry. At Country Club and I-40, on both sides of I-40, the going from I-40 to Country Club and from Country Club to well, it's the other way. From I-40 to Country Club going both ways, right? Is that east and west, right? The primary is Country Club and the secondary is I-40, right? And so this example of the one that heads east here, this is a pedestrian crossing. This is also a bike path, by the way, that goes across at Country Club and I-40. And that pedestrian crossing is about 7 seconds. And so the idea that I had come up with was if the crossing can sit within the minimum that's needed on that primary street, then it makes sense that when the light goes to green on that primary street, you can set that crosswalk to on. And it won't impact the pedestrian, it won't impact the vehicular traffic of the cars coming on to Country Club. There's still enough time to turn that crosswalk on without having to press the button, right? So, for example, Country Club and I-40, again on I-40 going, heading east, right, is this one here, right? Then we go over the bridge to I-40. Then I-40 here coming back on, and Nestle Purina. All three of those roads are secondary to the primary street, right? And again, as I said in the past, I worked for NASCA. I was the team lead. I actually stepped down from team lead last spring and told them that I was going to focus on this personally. And I actually went to ADOT and submitted a ticket to ADOT asking them to fix these 3 traffic lights. And I said, please fix them so that when the lights are green on the primary road, the crosswalks turn. And they went and they fixed all 3 of these lights. So now when you are driving from Hampton Inn on that bike path, you'll see all 3 of those lights do that automatically. So when the streets turn green on Country Club, you'll see that the crosswalk happens and then the countdown happens and then it turns to red on each of those areas, right? Now that's a bike path. It's an okay bike path. I think I laugh because the one over the highway, it's got trash. They don't know how to clean it up. There's glass everywhere. But the fact that just that little fix there has saved me significant time because I don't have to stop anymore. I can slow down my pace as I see that that light is about to turn and I'm not going to make it. I slow down my pace. I let the light cycle and I don't have to stop because it goes straight through, right? So I get to go all the way from Hampton Inn all the way down to the Route 66 trail this way and under those bridges. It has really kind of improved the experience without having to impact the end, right? So.
Hey, Kevin, can you talk a little bit about that process of opening that ticket? Did they call you? Did they email you? Did they?
No,
communicate?
so
They just did it?
they just did it. And it was funny. So and again, I did that just on my own, sent an email to them and put an incident ticket in. And the lady said, well, we'll get back to you. And then I drove and all of a sudden they were just done, which was funny. So then I put an article I did an article letter to the editor commending them for their work. And I heard back from the director who thanked me and put it in their daily, monthly letter to the ADOT
They don't
team.
get a lot of kudos.
Yeah.
Right then.
And so I'm kind of bringing this up for 2 points, and we've kind of talked about myself here. One point is, in my list of things I was working on, I had those 3 streets in mind, and then I had started, and I haven't submitted it, to request the same work on this Steves and Route 66 road. And so in my effort to be fully transparent, I want this committee to know that I'm still going to proceed on my own, and I'll make sure I put in there that I'm not associated with anything but myself. I want to do one more incident ticket to finish that road, to ask them to do the same on Steves. Because Steves, I think, is a small road. I think that that walk could be 10 seconds or so and still fit within that cycle. So it wouldn't need to be done.
Yeah, keep us surprised. That's great work.
So that's one of the things. The other thing I wanted this committee to think about is there's some roads here that are done by the city that I think we could ask or talk to the city about doing. And so, for example, this one here is 4th Street and Solier. So this is the mini home complex that's right across the street, and that path is so small. And this 4th Street is the primary, and Solier is the secondary. So the minute that turns green, I don't see why we couldn't ask to turn that on and count it down without negatively impacting the process. But I'd have to ask the traffic engineers if that's something they could add to the list or not. But I wanted to think about possibly that, and 4th and Sparrow, although this median may make it complex. So I would defer to their expertise. If they feel like this median takes too long to cross, that it could impact the traffic pattern of the way the streets are timed, or what those patterns are, then I wouldn't want to hinder that. But if it is, because then the reason I think about this is that 4th Street that goes down to Butler at the overpass towards where we're trying to build that whole thing, right? So it helps kind of improve that experience for the whole deal around without, and it's a small win that doesn't impact traffic, right? And so the last thing I wanted to tell this committee to think about is, do you know of any? Because I know as much as we bike, we've gone all around town, and I'll bet you there are some possible candidates that could fit this path where, and so what I think about is if it fits this path, the question is, is it on the same side of the road as a bike path, right? We want it to follow a bike path because that's kind of the easy idea to do, right? Is it parallel to the primary street? And is that secondary street narrow enough to possibly fit within a window? And so if you thought about it, I'd love to hear about it, because it'd be something we might be able to in the future talk about doing as simple wins to help with that experience.
Very informative, Kevin, and really, like, I think we're moving in the direction of more and more separated bikeways
Exactly,
and giving people off-street options
exactly.
along primary roads.
Exactly,
So-
that's right. And the underpasses are gonna be awesome, right? Underpasses and all of that stuff, but there'll still be intersections we have to do, right? And I still,
Well, and Martin's made it clear that we do not have the money to build underpasses at every intersection.
Or should we?
Or
nor should we.
That's giving up. Underpass is giving up on making the
Yeah,
intersection pedestrian bicycle friendly.
yeah.
I'm curious what your experience has been with turning traffic at like Solier, for example, because depending on which side of the street you're on
Yeah,
and whether you're following the bike path on the actual traffic side of the street or the opposite side of the street,
right.
turning traffic impacts your ability to get onto Solier, or you have to
Yes.
make what are they called? This turn that you do as a bike where you cross and then you go here.
Yeah, you go in and over, yeah.
2 states left.
Thank you, 2-stage left.
Yeah, I've had
Which I
issues.
never do because I'm lazy.
One of the things that also, and I could get on, one of the things that also drives me crazy that they've done in these smart intersections that just if you're at a 4-way intersection, and I'll kind of go back to my fun little 4-way intersection to give you an example, right? If you're at a 4-way intersection and you want to,
Which one's the primary in this example?
this one doesn't matter, right? So if you're at a four-way intersection and you want to cross this way on this street, right? And let's say I press this crosswalk button right here. If I press this crosswalk button, this one doesn't work. They don't go together, right? So I would find myself pressing that button, going over here, and the light would not be ready to go and cars would honk at me, right?
Or you just have to wait, you have to press.
Or I'd have to wait, press it again, or I wouldn't get there in time to wait. So then I'd miss it to press it again. So I'd have to run. And so I find that at Solier a lot because I press that button and then I sit in that intersection, that little area that I told you about. And then I drive on the road to go down Solier towards, Fox Hill there. So, and I've had people honk at me because I've been honk at me and blow in front of me.
Yeah.
When I'm actually in the street, which is ridiculous. So. But yeah, it's funny. I joked about it, but I do think biking currently has made me more aggressive than when I started, because it teaches you to be that way, because you kind of have to be to get through.
Assertive, maybe.
Yeah.
That was very good.
Great.
Ox, Glenn, or any questions for Kevin?
I feel like the major issue is turning at those kinds of intersections and drivers who are stopped at the red making right turns. That's almost always where, at Solier particularly.
Oh, Solier.
Trouble.
Yeah.
They're not
But-
looking right.
They're not looking right. And Ponderosa and
Right.
Route 66 is the other one that's
That
awful.
one scares.
You said you feel like the major issue is turning vehicles?
Yeah,
Or turning, okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
So you're saying it like Solier and Fourth turning, going up that hill?
yeah, like turning right on red.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get in front of the traffic that's about to come with
Yeah.
the green light and they just turn without checking,
Yeah, no, I've had,
especially if you're on a sidewalk.
And again, they're looking.
Yeah, they're looking at the
Left.
oncoming traffic that's
Yeah.
about to go because of green. They're not checking to
Right.
see if there's anyone in the waiting
Yeah.
at that intersection.
yeah, and you're trying to go straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I've seen that. In my path, I am going right with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, normally, but you're right. I've seen that a lot. And that's a problem because I've seen it during school, right? When schools, the NPA kids are trying to get there. So, the solution to that is the set it first, right? I mean, give it 3 seconds and but
That would certainly help, or we could outlaw lights on red.
Yeah, I definitely share your concern of just like, you see the white walking man and you're like, cool, I can go, but you can't really.
You never
And,
can go.
and
Yeah.
you know that, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, what are you? It's like, I guess they'll go even if they do see you too, so.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all dang. It's like, I had the right of way. You can say that all day from your wheelchair and
Exactly.
it doesn't matter.
Right.
Downtown too, I'm sure, like, as you're mentioning, Martin, with those signs that tell you not to turn if there's a train, not to turn right, and people do anyway. Often the walk sign's on and people can cross if you're on a bike coming off of Route 66, or if you're a pedestrian and cars blow through it anyway,
Yeah.
even if you're in the middle of the intersection. So that's the other one where I've seen a lot of that, where you're in the intersection with the walk light on, and cars
Still going at you.
still go.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I don't like that during the train, like on Steve's, right? That won't ever turn for you. You have to blow that light. And, what have we done? Ponderosa Parkway, you have to run that crosswalk because you can press it all day long and until the train's done, it won't open.
No,
Sometimes it does.
Does it?
Oh, yeah.
I've never had that happen.
Just look at the left turn the other way.
That one, the operation of it is kind of a mystery, especially when it's a training section, because sometimes there's a walk light, sometimes there's not.
Yeah,
And I've literally been through there 10,000 times
yeah.
over the years, and I need to start like documenting every time, because every time it's like, there's different characteristics, right? There are cars present, there's a train, there's not a train. So I have to document everything and then like eliminate all the variables and see how it operates.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I think I had told you, I was like, I think they fixed it and everything I think is right.
Yeah,
It's never the same. It's always.
I was just gonna say, I've had that cycle reset on me, like when you push the button at the end of like a green arrow, so you don't get like at the start of the green light. a long traffic cycle and it never changes to allow you to cross.
Wow.
Yeah, it seems that,
I just think.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like when the train preempts the signal, right? And like what happens, like what it all preempts when the train is present is kind of a question. So it may, yeah, like if you pressed it and then the train preempts it, I don't think it remembers that you pressed it. So
That's interesting.
it seems like it particularly jams up at about 7:57 AM whenever you're trying to get. What is the rule, for if a pedestrian or a person on a bike has a walk, a no walk signal, but it's a green light, is the pedestrian allowed to cross? Sergeant? Sorry. What is the rule if a pedestrian or a bicycle on a sidewalk has a steady hand, but a green light?
So, per state law, if the signal for the pedestrian says do not walk, even if the light's green, it's supposed to cross.
Okay.
And I think bicycles aren't even supposed to ride in a crosswalk, right? Even on the foots,
So
Actually, it's a,
there,
right?
there is no statute that says a bicycle can't ride in a crosswalk.
except for downtown.
Oh, okay.
there is,
Unless it's posted, no bicycles or anything like that.
Oh, okay. So bikes are allowed to bike, you don't have to dismount.
Yeah, that's, we see a lot of accidents that happen because bicyclists are going so fast and they cruise across the crosswalk when cars aren't seeing anybody getting ready to cross and they go and then all of a sudden there's a bicycle right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there is an Arizona Supreme Court case that decided the issue. There is nothing in, the legislature's never addressed it in ARS, but the Supreme Court did. And it basically said that there's nothing in ARS that prevents a bicyclist from riding through a crosswalk. Lots of states that follow the Uniform Vehicle Code or have adopted some version of it. There's a provision that says that bicyclists at crosswalks have the same rights and responsibilities as pedestrians, which to me helps clarify, because a pedestrian can't step off into danger. Like you have to cross when it's safe. Like you can't step in front of a car that doesn't have a decent opportunity to stop for you or yield for you. But once you've stepped into the intersection, into the crosswalk safely, then then cars need to yield to you. You have the right of way. And if you apply that same logic so there's kind of for pedestrians, there's a duty and an a duty and a right. The duty is that you cross safely, like you don't step out and put yourself in harm. And then the right is that you have the right of way without a vehicle should yield to you. When you apply that to bicyclists, the same thing applies. Like you as a cyclist can't ride into a crosswalk and put yourself in danger. In other words,
Right.
not give a vehicle ample time to yield or stop to you. And that's what happens when bikes are going too fast, is they're really not, they're entering in a way that puts them at hazard potentially.
Makes sense, yeah.
So if you enter as a pedestrian, then the rule should be that once you're in the crosswalk as a bicyclist, if you entered it safely, that you should be yielded to, that you have the right to be, have the right of way in that case.
Yeah, it's funny.
It doesn't have that, so it leaves a lot of questions and misunderstandings unless you know that Supreme Court case. And no ARS.
what's the traffic rule for if you're stopped at a red light where you can make a right on red, but you don't have a signal to, and there's someone in the crosswalk or the crosswalk signal goes? You're not allowed to turn into a
If someone
clear.
is legally in the crosswalk, I mean, regardless, if there's somebody in the crosswalk, you're stopped at a red light, you're waiting to turn right. Depending on which way the pedestrian is going, if the pedestrian is coming towards you, as soon as the pedestrian has reached the center of the intersection, you have to yield to them while they cross the lanes that you're trying to turn into. If they're going the opposite way, you have to wait until they have crossed those lanes and reached the center of the intersection going the other way before you can make your turn.
Got it. So if the pedestrian is just stopped waiting to cross, the car has to wait for them to go halfway?
No, if they have not entered the roadway, then the vehicle still technically can make a right-hand turn. But once the pedestrian has entered the roadway, then the vehicle has to yield to it.
That's kind of sketchy, like if there's a car that wants to like go before, like you're kind of playing.
You know, and it happens, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, the guy's thinking, okay, is this pedestrian gonna jump out or do I have time to, quick turn in front of him? So, it's ultimately once the pedestrian's entered the crosswalk.
Yeah, I read an interesting article from a guy who was arguing the point that we would be safer if we turned the crosswalk signs off and just left the lights with green and red. Because it just, then people have to know to yield, right? When the light's green, you gotta yield to pedestrians.
Well, that makes sense,
Thanks and all of
because
that stuff.
if you are a pedestrian who's legally in the crosswalk,
Yep,
or a car who's legally in the envelope of the intersection, and
right,
it turns yellow and it turns red, you have the legal right to finish your
Yeah.
crossing.
right. That's to be safe. That's the safe path, right? Yeah. That- Interesting.
There anything in the traffic statutes about blocking the crosswalk for pedestrians or bicycles? So like you're trying to make a right and you pulled halfway in?
They have obstruction of a thoroughfare.
Okay.
So if your actions are that you are not actually crossing the road, like you are there and you are not moving when you should be, you could potentially be charged with obstruction.
How many people in this room feel like people are driving faster than ever on our roadways?
Like all of a sudden?
Like, no, over the last year. I've seen an uptick in cars just breaking the speed limit. Or running red lights, or,
That I've seen.
I've seen a lot of red light around.
yeah,
Specifically faster.
yeah, I feel like the people that I talk to are like, man, people are going so fast out there all the time.
It's California.
I don't know. Interesting. Just like, I don't have any like evidence, and just like anecdotally, it seems like cars are going faster and they're running more lights and there's more aggressive driving and.
See, the strange thing about my job is wherever I am, people. It's like,
Everyone's.
We're all not saying it.
There's a lot of brake lights.
They put down their phones around you too while they're driving, or are they still texting?
it just depends on whether they see me.
Sorry, I have one more law question. But you do have to stop, a car has to stop at the stop line and then like ease up. Or, if you want to do a right on red, you legally have to stop first at the stop line, then
Yeah,
like
so.
go up, yeah.
So it's like a stop sign. Okay, so there's a stop line and then there's a stop sign.
Right,
And if there's no stop line, then you have to stop at the sign or at the curb, and then you
Right.
can continue to, pull out. You're not supposed to stop in crosswalks
Right.
unless you want to make a right turn or you're exiting a private drive and you want to turn left or right, then you're permitted to stop at the spot on a crosswalk momentarily, as long as you've stopped prior to it
yeah,
first.
stop line.
You can like creep in here.
Yeah.
See if it's safe to proceed.
That's,
So
that's.
you have to stop, you have to stop at the crosswalk at the stop line.
Yeah.
And then if you intend on turning left or right, depending on what the situation, then you can creep forward into the crosswalk and you can stay there momentarily.
Right,
There's your big key, right? Everyone's stopping at the corner.
well, they go through the crosswalk, then stop,
See you ahead of you.
right,
Yeah.
then stop at the stop line, look both ways, then go.
You said they all do.
So they are stopping. It's just at below kind of the level of human perception to see that they're stopping.
Stop line.
Are we moving on to the next agenda item, Martin? Am I calling this out or you?
You were the chair.
Okay, Fox Glen Street traffic calming. Number 2.
All right, just a quick bit of background on this. Everybody know where Fox Glen Street is? On the east side, by Fox Glen Park.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of goes between Solier and Butler. So the neighbors in that area petitioned the city for traffic calming, and there's a formal process to go through to kind of initiate that process. Once the neighborhood petition, the city will go out and study things like crossings, vehicle speeds, vehicle volumes, crash history, and determine if it's a good candidate or not for traffic calming. So after the neighborhood petition, the city collected that information and determined that it was a good candidate for traffic calming. I think the speed limit along there is 25, and the 85th percentile speed was about 31. So a decent number of cars are going fast. We did a survey of the neighborhood to kind of find out what their primary concerns are, be it traffic calming, getting across the street safely, accommodating pedestrians, accommodating bicycles.
I love that crosswalk there. That's great.
And so the city looked at a bunch of different options for traffic calming, and came up with what's shown here on the screen. And then I'll go back for a second. And we've done this process in Boulder Point recently, Brandon Homes area along Woodland, and in Cheshire on Fremont, the painting on the street. So this is kind of the prototype of what the city came up with traffic calming. And this is only shown at Deer Crossing, which is really that last intersection closest to Maverick. But the same kind of treatment could be replicated at Sparrow and then another street kind of in between it, which I forget.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I know exactly what she does.
And for full disclosure, I live like just right off of where this image is, like just right behind there in those townhouses.
Yeah,
So a couple features of this, right now that the street has parking on one side, on the east side, bike lanes on both sides, and then 2 travel lanes. It's a common configuration that the city uses. There was a time when our standards called for minor collectors to be 37 feet in width from gutter to gutter. And that 37 feet was for 2 travel lanes and parking along both sides. And generally those streets weren't striped. There might have been a center line to show you where the middle was, but the parking and the lanes weren't marked beyond that. A lot of those streets have been converted to this configuration where there's parking on one side, bike lanes on both sides, and then 2 travel lanes. So we got rid of parking on one side in favor of bike lanes on both sides. And parking in single family residential areas on street is generally pretty light. So outside of the inconvenience of some people having to go across the street to park on street, there's more than enough space in the street to accommodate how many people want to park. Like there's typically very few vehicles parked on the street in this section. So a couple of features about what's been drawn here. You can see that the parking has been taken out on either side of Deer Crossing. The bike lane has been moved out. On the south leg, raised concrete island would be added. And then striping would kind of be added to match. A crosswalk is added. There's no marked crosswalk there now.
correct.
There's a legal crosswalk there. We could discuss that another time. The difference between those two things. There also are not curb ramps on the west side of the street. So to have a real crossing, we would have to add curb ramps to that side as well. So I brought this to you this evening or this afternoon to get your comments on it. I have a couple of very specific questions that I want to ask of you. And I should mention that the traffic calming point of this is that there's a new object in the middle of the road that vehicles will have to go around. And the process of going around that may require them to slow down. That's the idea. The lane is a little bit narrower, but not significantly. I think it goes from 11 to 10. But it's really that vertical, horizontal, I guess, deflection in your path of travel as a vehicle that encourages people to slow down.
So isn't that gonna be underwater during the monsoons?
That whole street is underwater.
Right, so
Yes, that won't change.
They're gonna run that.
Yeah.
They're not gonna know about that, so we'd have to figure out.
Yeah, there's typically signing that goes, vertical signing that goes on these islands.
Okay.
We'll show you where it is.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's, what does it look like now? I can't picture.
Let me,
Google Maps.
somebody share this too.
Just put in your address and
No.
Whose petition was this?
Yeah.
Which one of your aliases did you use?
Yeah.
So here's a representative, and I'll go to street view. This is the parking lane, bike lane, 2 through lanes, and the bike lane on the far side.
Yeah, I do. The cars do get in the way a little. There aren't that many, but they seem to be going to work too. So I have the doors opened when I'm
Yeah.
driving there a lot. So,
So parking lane,
Yeah.
bike lane, travel lane, bike lane. That's 37 feet. The travel lanes are 11 feet. This bike lane is 4, this bike lane is 5, and the parking is 6. Just to check my math, but I think that adds up.
What will the new bike lane be?
The same. It won't,
Okay.
it won't.
Cause I always wonder why the medians, like it's great for the traffic calming, but if that were a little smaller, it could be a larger bike lane and then cars would be less inclined to go into the bike lane.
Like the buffered lanes
Yep.
where you got
Yeah.
the second stripe at least,
Yep.
if not anything else.
Yeah, let me outline the questions, because I think that's a really good one to talk about. I think actually in this scenario, the bike lane on that side of the street goes to 5 feet. Well, actually, it is 5 feet, so never mind, it would be the same. A median, when it's used as kind of a refuge island, should be a minimum of 6 feet wide. To provide protection for pedestrians, and then bikes are typically 6 feet wide. So if you're walking with a bike or riding a bike and the median is less than 6 feet,
Right.
you're sticking out on one end or the other, unless you go diagonal. And even in, kind of federal guidelines for, accessibility, say if the median is less than 6 feet wide, it's really not a refuge, and you'd have to do the truncated domes, the detectable warning strips for, vision impaired pedestrians. If it's 6 feet or wider, then you have those. So it's 6 feet or wider, it's recognized that there's a refuge to go. So that breaks your crossing into 2. You cross one half of the street, then you cross the other. Really, this street is relatively low volume, relatively low speed, although it could be slower, clearly, because of what the neighborhood is asking for. So it's not really super difficult to cross at once. The median provides as a nice amenity for pedestrians, but not absolutely needed in this case. However, if we're putting an object in the middle of the road to get people to drive around, the bigger and more imposing that obstacle in the middle of the road is, the more people are apt to slow down to go around it. Does all that make sense? So there's kind of like there's levers, and if you turn this one up, another one gets turned down. So we find a balance. So we have these in other places. I think of the one on San Francisco, north of downtown. And it's not uncommon for cars to avoid slowing down. We'll use the bike lane. So yeah, I think, yeah. Is it right at Elm?
Yeah, that's my street.
Yeah. So a bike lane and a travel lane are all pavement, right? So if a car feels like they can use that, will they slow down or just go into the bike lane to avoid having to slow down?
you know the answer.
I mean, that's here, these orange dots are questions. How significant an issue is that in a case like this? And should we take that into consideration with the design? And then the second part is, can that be mitigated? In this case, we added a green bike lane. I believe studies have shown that green bike lanes are just as easy to drive on as ungreen bike lanes. Could be wrong. Or we had thought of like a physical buffer, so there's space in between the bike lane and the travel lane. And if that buffer were colored or textured, it would even provide more of kind of a, an indication to drivers that's not where they should be driving. The challenge is we have so little room that if we added a buffer, something is gonna have to get more narrow. If it's the bike lane, then bikes have less, we don't wanna go less than 4 feet as an absolute minimum.
Right.
If it's the travel lane, a vehicle will have to slow down, but now are they more likely to be tempted to veer out of that travel lane because they wanna go faster and the travel lane is too small anyway. So even with a buffer, are they getting out of it? And does the existence of that buffer kind of make up, because now you have physical space between vehicle lane and bike lane.
You define buffer, it's like buffer paint on the road, or is it like elevated? What do you mean by buffer?
Not elevated, so it's just horizontal space in the road. It could be defined by 2 stripes. It could be painted a different color. It could be textured, so when a car runs over it, it gets, a tactile indication that it's out of its lane. Another option, I'll show you images of this, is to put the bike lane behind like a curb swelling or a bump out. Now that is a buffer that is raised in that case, but it even wider. So there's a physical separation between where vehicles are and where bikes are. The reason that this was kind of rejected at the city level is because it's outside of the area that gets plowed. And so it may not get snow clearance in the winter. So again, the question here for you is like, what does that lack of ability to keep it clear of snow nullify the whole concept? Or for however many days we have snow, is it a worthwhile trade-off for all the rest of the year where we don't have snow?
Well, when you say snow, you probably also mean street cleaning. So
Yes.
it would be cinders and rocks and,
Yep.
stuff.
I will say that we have no mechanism to clean the middle of the island of those things either. Cinders will gather there, snow will fall there too. So this is not a maintenance-free
Another thing to think about,
prospect in either case.
because I lived there too, right? They hire people for when Knowles leaves and they have crosswalk guards for those corners and sections. And I wondered if this crosswalk would have to be considered by Knowles to see if that would be, because they're gonna walk those kids and then those kids are gonna bolt through that
Yeah,
area there. So it needs, at least they need to know about it and see if that's something that would be a concern for them or not.
that would be defined, I think by proximity to the school. We can look, I don't know
Gotcha.
what that dimension is. So let me show you some images of how bump outs might work. This is an artist's rendering, but you get the idea.
Is that AI?
And here's another version. So the island gets added, the bike lane really stays the same asphalt that it is. And then, the curb and gutter stay in place, so there's no new drainage concerns that come up. The drainage still goes. And there's another version of it.
So that would be in lieu of the island?
Yes, and if you can imagine if there's one of these on both sides, the vehicle lanes in the middle are being narrowed. You could narrow it to the point where vehicles feel uneasy about passing in that section and have to queue to each other. Like somebody will have to give way to the other car. They don't feel like they can both make it through the middle. And that, of course, provides slower speeds.
Cool. My other
I mean,
concern though, there's a lot of houses, right? You're putting that on the side, but then there's houses at each end, right? So there's a
Yeah, there's a house here and a house here.
house here and a house here and go all the way down the street, right? So you have to,
It would just go out for a short period, the same,
okay.
similar length as the taper is here. So not the full length of the road in this
Okay.
case.
So I think part of the process for the city to implement traffic calming like this is that people who live immediately adjacent to it have to sign off on it, or a percentage of them have to sign off on it.
Gotcha.
And like, we'll, converse with them about, like this person will lose presumably a parking space in front of their house, for example. This person doesn't really have it. There's a driveway here and a bus stop right here. So that might be a space they're losing there.
I mean, this may not work here, but there's options where you can have the parking on the other side. So like the parking is the buffer, but there's probably too many driveways for that to make work. And then you said not a lot of people are parking, so there wouldn't be a lot of cars be a buffer, but that
Yeah,
would be something
yeah,
to think about.
it is. I don't know how much we thought about that, but we could take a look. You're talking about
So the
kind of switching, putting the.
The
Yeah.
bike lane and the
next to
parking are swapped so that the parking is the buffer and then also helps against dooring. So you don't get doored as much on the passenger side.
The other thing that you really need in that case is like a buffer between the bike lane and the parking lane. Or somebody mentioned the passenger side dooring.
Yeah.
So the passenger has enough room to open the door and get out without being in the bike lane.
Cambridge, when I was there recently, they have this in some of the parts downtown and they had little, like concrete curbs there, probably about this big, standard curb height, and then stanchions, but cement stanchions, not the ones we've put in here that get knocked down immediately, between the parked cars and the bike lane. Every, I don't know, 3 feet or so, that also helps control where people were parking. So if you're trying to park with a passenger, you wouldn't want to park too close to stanchion or you'd hit it with your door. So that's another thing I've seen to try to prevent dooring for that.
It sounds like there's not many people parking on the street.
Yeah,
So it might not provide the right buffer.
but it would still be a space buffer because they could veer into the
Still a
parking.
space buffer.
Yeah, and a bigger one.
And then is the city just done with candlesticks? Is that? No more candlesticks? Cause that, at least by the bike lane, would help, even if you just had 3 or 4, would protect the cars from swerving into the bike lane. So even if it's just a couple rows. But I know how the city feels about candlesticks and snow.
I think regardless of how we feel about candlesticks, they're hard to avoid like snowplows. I think they're kind of in the path of drought. They're in danger of always being run over.
You also could do like a temporary buffer, so like planters that at least are there maybe 9 months out of the year and then are removed during snow periods. Obviously take more maintenance, like for the city putting them out and being responsible for removing them, but that's also maybe something to consider. Is like cars are gonna go into the bike lane and I feel like then it just depletes all the money going into the sidewalk. I mean, it's not gonna slow down cars.
Yeah.
Because they'll just use the bike lane instead. So I feel like you do need some sort of physical barrier.
It's a double whammy, right?
I never really thought about temporary buffers, but that's kind of a brilliant
Yeah,
way of
it's,
doing it, because that's the problem. I learned so much about that snow removal issue with the candlestick project and how much of a problem that created. And if there was like a temporary one, and then as soon as the parking ban goes into effect, move them.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think for a
There's a
small
lot of
scale.
people bike during that time too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think on at least a small scale where it's mainly like 4 or something, like, which this is quite small, like the area you're trying to control, so maybe.
Would you then put like you paint the buffered area or something like that, so you have a visual?
Maybe,
indication?
yeah,
Or you
yeah,
could
yeah.
then put a nice planter on it?
Yeah.
So when you think of a planter, that would be in lieu of the center median and more like a temporary version of the bump outs.
Because you'd have the center median and where cars would veer into the bike lane, you could add, you need some sort of candlestick, ideally it'd be like
Yeah.
a candlestick, but if the state doesn't want a candlestick, something, even like tires, just something to like. So.
Didn't you say you did a bunch of these?
Or the little armadillo.
Yeah.
An arty thing.
Yeah, just something.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's the.
For that.
The less maintenance we can require, I think, the more successful we
Because can snowplows go over those little like armadillo things? Right, no.
Yeah, I think a removable buffer is like a great idea. I've never thought about that. I'll have to think about that some more.
Is there room for that? Because,
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, yeah.
Someone would be responsible for.
You going and picking them up,
Bringing in
bring them back.
storage and maintenance
Yeah.
and.
I think that would make it difficult.
You gotta
Not
put
a
the
neighborhood
plan to them.
association, right?
No,
Or like these.
there's a lot of motivated people.
Who complain? I'm happy to do this.
Since you wanted to this.
You willing to build a
Move the
greenhouse
planter,
to
feed,
store
water the
these
plants,
plants?
and send planter.
Maybe it's too tricky.
I do think though that it still is right, like, if I think about San Francisco and Elm in that intersection, people absolutely drive in the bike lane all the time. Or swerve into it to avoid slowing down, because right after, the last traffic light right by the court, they just take off, and wedge you out if you're a bike.
Yeah, they're like F1 racers waiting at that light.
Yeah, it's really intense. Everyone's really intense after that intersection
For some reason.
for some reason.
What about, this is more of a permanent thing, but what about an option like that? It wouldn't have to be moved. Sweeping and snow removal would be a question. Would it be effective for traffic calming?
I am of perhaps the unpopular opinion that snow removal, even when the city attempts to do it with their best efforts in the bike lanes, is so poor that it doesn't really matter if it doesn't get removed.
I kind of agree with that.
People may disagree, but I think because of like the challenges that city staff have shared with us in terms of where they can put snow, where cinders collect, all those kinds of things. That's my vote. I feel like there's relatively few periods of time where it actually becomes a concern in terms of like total bike travel. We all know that like bike travel is way higher in summer, spring, summer, fall than it is in winter. It drops off dramatically. So I'd prefer to see something like that personally.
So you would de-emphasize.
I would de-emphasize snow removal.
Okay, does a group agree with that generally? It's good information.
You know,
The one thing sorry,
I
Daniel.
agree. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's also a small, it's only like 4 feet long or 5 feet long, right? It's just a small part of the bike lane. And
Yeah,
it's
maybe-
a
yeah, maybe-
neighborhood street. I
Right.
think I would think differently. It's like Butler, but like,
Yeah.
I think it's a small. And this would kind of protect against cinders, right? Like less cinders would get in the bike lane because this would kind of,
Maybe.
right? Maybe it'd collect
Those things seem to,
get
But also,
everywhere.
I think on a residential street like that, when it snows, you wind up taking the lane anyway, or at least I do,
Mhm.
because the snow's in the bike lane.
Right.
So, I don't know, I'd probably be in the lane anyway. I was riding.
Which slows traffic down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
the street is a classic case of when it snows, this is a snack down street. This street becomes one lane.
Right.
And that's where there's traffic in both directions, bicyclists, lots of pedestrians.
Right.
The other thing I wonder about in a case like this is, like a lot of times bike lanes have snow plowed into them. So like it's much more than the snow that's fallen. It's actually kind of deeper and icier. In a case like this, snow wouldn't get plowed into it.
Yeah,
So,
it's almost, yeah.
I don't think it will, I mean, ideally it would melt when the snow melts, but I think like people will walk on it and people will ride on it. And then you get kind of this icy, challenging thing until it melts. But I think the fact that it doesn't get plowed into it changes the dynamic a little bit.
You could build something like that, again, like kind of what you did with in Cheshire and Fremont Street in Cheshire. Like, I mean, that was the middle median, but would you again with candlesticks and paint, but you could do a temporary version of this and then monitor how traffic is and then make it permanent, but.
Yeah. Okay, so did we answer all the questions? It's challenging for sure, and we don't have really a budget for actual improvement. So, I mean, even after we decide on what might help, there's a process of trying to find the money to do it.
You got that new grant writer.
Just Cheshire, they just had a $10,000 budget, so I think you can do a lot with $10,000.
Want to know my idea for traffic calming? Generally as an experimental thing. So in every neighborhood, you order a load of hay bales from Colorado or whatever. Just dump it there and go, okay, neighborhood. These are like Legos, do with it what you will, like, and then they come up with like how they want to do traffic calming with the bales. What I suspect is that some neighborhoods would just build a barrier across.
You're like, sorry,
front,
Potts Hill just stopped right
And
there.
then everyone would park their car just outside the barrier.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like showing that we need closed streets.
And it's ultimate, like
That's what
letting the
people really
neighborhood-
want, they just don't know
Yeah,
it.
What do you want? Like, no, actually do it. Do what you want.
Can we maybe put on the agenda for next time, the term is escaping my mind right now, speed bumps? Just generally, because I'm a little, I don't see a lot of speed bumps in Flagstaff. And we constantly talk about speed.
I have a funny story about speed. Yeah, I used to live at Reardon. But back in the day, I had a little condo there. And every year they'd put the speed bumps and every year they'd be in the corner where they plowed. Like, so the snowplow would there'd be 12 speed bumps in a pile when the snow would melt. The snowplow would just pull them all in. They'd redo them again and then they'd get rid of them and they'd put them in again.
So coincidentally, the council is going to have a fair item agenda coming up. I'm not sure exactly when, but it should be in one of the next council meetings on speed bumps. Basically, and typically what happens, a fair item is, it's an acronym, I'm not gonna remember what it is.
Future agenda.
Initiative?
Resolution.
That's the rest.
The FAIR?
FAIR, yeah. Future agenda, yeah, we got a good start. Anyway, they don't usually get a lot of information at it, but they decide if it's a topic they want to pursue or they want staff to pursue. Generally, they just need a few council members to go along and it will get pursued. They'll see what's happening with that and there may be information collected or a presentation made in regard to that, and then we can certainly share it with this group.
Yeah, I just haven't heard us discuss how we feel about speed bumps and where they might be appropriate and what effect the snow plows have on them, like you said, and
Yeah, there's different versions of classic speed bumps and speed tables and speed humps and
Yeah, the humps and
raised crosswalks and other things that.
I think they've been thinking about it all wrong. I think they need to start making speed recesses. Let's make a 6-inch hole across the.
Get bigger though.
So giant bags. Sam has this and other Sam.
All right, we should keep moving.
okay, let's go with,
Wait, Sam, other Sam.
Other side.
other
Yeah, hi
side.
all. Just wanted to weigh in on the speed humps. We will be bringing that to council. Honestly, there's really no huge opposition at this point. There won't be a presentation on it. It'll simply be trying to understand the request from the council member that brought it forward, from Mayor Daggett, and then we will discuss it as it relates to traffic calming and see how that works. A lot of technology and a lot of design behind that has changed over the years, so we're open to the conversation and we're going to talk about it. Frankly, if it was between that or these mini roundabouts, we would probably take the speed humps all day. The mini roundabouts have already proven to be fairly cumbersome and problematic for any large piece of equipment, not even our equipment. So we've been working through that process as well. But yeah, that is coming up. Just wanted to let you all know where we stand on that.
Appreciate that, Sam.
Are there removable speed bumps?
Yes.
There are, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know about the bear item, just happenstance that popped in my brain. Aspen niche of bicycle parking, very exciting. Over by the pay and take.
Yes, it's under construction if you've been by there
I have.
recently. So this is the space between pay and take.
2024.
Yes, like a couple of weeks. Between the CenturyLink building and Pantech, on the on the other side of the street from the Orpheum. We got a license agreement from CenturyLink for the first 2 parking spaces, and if you go by there, you can see it's under construction now. It will be spaced for 12 to 24 bicycles, and I'll show you why there's a range. It's supposed to be done on 18th of October. The sidewalk is closed. Unfortunately, it will remain closed until then. Although people don't seem to have a problem walking in that side of the street from what I've observed. So this is kind of what it looks like in plan view. I'm gonna blow that up for you a little bit. So these are the parking spaces in CenturyLink. This is their driveway and they have a gate there now. They rarely use that driveway. They don't use it on a daily basis, but they use it if they get in deliveries of big pieces of equipment. I mean, like things that go in the back of flatbed trailers. So they want to keep that access, but it's generally, like, it won't be an interference with the bike parking on a daily basis. Then we'll have 2 swing gates as well. These are the bike racks. And
So CenturyLink is just giving this to us?
yeah, they just gave it to us.
This is so cool then.
Write a nice letter to the editor about it.
Yeah, Kevin.
Sure they get a lot of.
Imagine they would appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool.
So this is what the racks look like. And think of these as essentially a hoop rack with like a weird thing that connects them underneath. So the bikes kind of park this way. There's 27 inches between them. Ideally, we would have 36 inches between them to support being able to park bikes on both sides of that hoop. So if a bike is parked on one side of that hoop, for all 3 of these racks, it yields 12. If bikes are parked on both sides of the hoop for all 3 racks, it yields 24. So the answer is somewhere in the middle is how many it would yield. I want you to know that we played with ideas of like having like hanging bike racks on the wall. I'm generally not a huge fan of those because people have cargo, people have e-bikes, people have just generally bikes that are too heavy for them to pick up. But if it's not the only option, like if some people would have that, it could increase the number of spaces available. And it was kind of an homage to the reason that we're doing this in the first place is that a long time ago, people were hanging their bikes in the tree in front of the pants. Who remembers that?
That's cool.
I mean, it was kind of a cool thing that really disrupted the sidewalk. So like mixed, it was like, everybody like loved it. It was like, we took pictures of it, but it blocked the sidewalk, so.
Probably not good for the tree.
That too. Any questions, comments? The wall behind it will be, or the fence behind it will be decorative instead of chain link.
It's a good thing we didn't do that. It's a good thing we didn't do that bike DUI thing. Been real problematic.
Those 2 things were incompatible.
Is it covered like bike parking or it's just?
Yeah.
And it's in like the street parking? Or I'm confused, like it's.
Let me go back to the site plan.
It's like in their parking lot.
Okay,
So it's the street
okay.
parking, the sidewalk, and then the chain link fence, before, and then their parking lot. So we're taking their first two parking spaces and moving that fence back.
Okay,
So
that's, yeah.
it'll be outside of the sidewalk altogether.
So you just enter it from the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't like go through it.
How did this come about?
Great.
It was, I mean, really the bikes hanging in trees was a clear indication that we needed bike parking. This has been a long time. in the making.
Yeah.
I don't even want to admit how many years we've been working on it. So it took a long time to work with CenturyLink to get that license agreement negotiated.
That's awesome.
Really, this whole project is being done by beautification. They're paying for the whole thing. Beautification funds.
Way better than walking to the chain link fence too.
Yeah,
Been forced to do that times.
that's a great improvement.
It's like,
Change my internet provider.
Well, it's not that good.
Check the price.
All right, do you want to move on?
Do we have any?
Yeah, kind of our strategies. We put more on than we can talk about. We don't have to talk on through all of them. But can I just show you like some real quick things on? This is the first mile, last mile grant program, and this is specific to bikeways. And real quick, we're adding bike lanes where we can, just really a few spots. We're converting existing bike lanes to buffered bike lanes. This is working out in more places. And the buffer will be, again, just distance, not physical separation, but a space between the bike lane and the travel lane. So that'll be either 2 feet or 3 feet. Is what it works out to. There's an advantage. At one time, we thought the buffer could be variable and like kind of take up the extra space in the street, but there's an advantage to having it a consistent buffer, because when street stripes it, they can set 2 jets on the paint truck and do both sides of the buffer at once. So we don't want to have them, and it's more complicated to change that width. So if they can just set it and then do the buffer, it makes it a lot easier for maintenance.
so we're talking buffer bike lanes, both sides of the road?
Yeah, both sides of the road, yeah.
And when is this?
Hopefully next year. So this is Lake Mary Road, U Heights Drive South, University. This is the part of the street that leads into that new roundabout. Forest, Cedar, Huntington, Solier, Cortland. Great. And then we're looking at, there's actually room for a buffer on Butler as well. So that might be part of it.
Just the one under the underpass there. That was your.
Actually kind of from Sawmill to Ponderosa. Shared lane markings, are planned. It's a little bit tough to see because it's a dashed line and these are fairly short sections, but we're expanding their use downtown to include Aspen and Birch west of Humphreys for the first few blocks.
So will that be a sign or
It's
on the street?
It's kind of both. It's the thing on the street and then it's a sign that says bikes may use full lane.
Okay.
And then the other two on the kind of the outside of downtown are Cherry and Ferdy. And then the blue dash is where there's a bike lane on one side and a shared lane marking on the other side. So we're using that at a lot of intersections. In fact, if I go to the next slide, these are a lot of intersections. You may have 2 travel lanes, and when you get to the intersection, a lane is added. So there's a through lane, a left turn, and a right through. So we're adding turn lanes. So it goes up to 3 lanes, and the bike lanes disappear. And the opposite side of the intersection, the same thing happens, and the bike lane reappears after a time. And we want to better accommodate bikes through those sections where the bike lane disappears. So one option is we have a bike lane on kind of the far side of the intersection, and then a shared lane marking on the front side of the intersection. So shared lane markings aren't ideal, of course, but I mean, at least it hopefully gives bikes an idea that there's at least something for them.
I think it gives cars an idea too, that bikes can be present.
Yeah,
And having it kind of in that through right lane, puts bikes in the middle of the lane, which is really where they should be anyway. And they completely avoid getting right hooked in that case, because they're not,
Right.
if they're not on the edge of the roadway, nobody's gonna drive in front of you like that. So it kind of works out. And we try to pay attention if you've got a hill to have, it's easier to have a share lane marking on the downhill side and a bike lane on the uphill. Because if you're riding uphill,
Yeah, right.
unless you have an e-bike,
I have an e-bike too.
you're going slower uphill, so having a bike lane is much handier. Going downhill, it's actually, like I go on Sparrow, and it's much easier to be in the middle of that lane. Because we go so fast on that hill and trying to stay in a bike lane on the edge of it. And then nobody tries to pass me.
Yeah.
Well, actually, people do try to pass me, but that's different. So we'll pay attention to that. If there's no room for bike lanes on both sides, does the topography kind of work out to make that happen? So these intersections are the ones that we're addressing where we lose bike facilities, but we can add, in most cases, a shared lane marking and a bike lane on one side.
Hey, Martin, how does this comport with the AMTP? Or,
This is all kind of started with the ATMP.
okay,
So this is what it looks like in total, and I want to show you, this is kind of our existing bikeway network. So it's mostly bike lanes, but a few other things like foot trails that are heavily commuter. And then, I don't know if this is, causes you to go, wow, that's a big change, or what am I looking at here?
Great pieces.
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest things are, the buffers, I think will be a nice addition. And then I think we can kind of promote the idea that we're filling in these gaps in the bike lane, and hopefully, cyclists will notice that and will be appreciated.
The crossings, there's quite a few crosswalks as well.
Yes, you mean like the cross bike?
Or, technically they're pedestrian crosswalks, but bikes can use them.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, oh, sorry, you're
Yeah,
getting to that.
that's these,
Right.
yeah. These are the enhanced crossings, so 3 along Fort Valley, a handful along Solier, a couple along Lake Mary Road,
Yeah, I find
possibly some other ones.
when I'm riding south on Fort Valley and I want to turn left and I'm in the bike lane and I want to turn left on Forest, like I have to stop and
Yeah.
like wait for about 10 minutes sometimes to get.
Yeah.
So that'll be super nice. Just press
Red-
the button.
The red means that it's the pedestrian activated, where you get a flashing red light, so vehicles are required
So
to
we can
stop.
stop traffic. Everyone knows it's my favorite.
Versus,
Sorry, I didn't say anything.
This- stay out of Fort Valley then.
It's better than nothing. I'll give it that.
it's where the foot's crossing, so, yeah. So we had this concept of enhanced bikeway corridors, and we had identified a couple of streets, and what we wanted to do was like a consistent treatment along the street of, higher level facilities, mostly striping, but to give bicyclists an idea that like, this corridor is like a really good bicycle corridor. So we could include buffered bike lanes, green share lane markings, cross bike markings, 2-stage left turns, a lot of paint things and a lot of things that are green, but hopefully it's something that would be visually, kind of add up to something. And working through this, like we keep losing options for different treatments, and we're kind of down to mainly green bike lanes in a few places and cross bike markings, which I included this to show you what that looks like. It just is kind of a continuation of the bike lane through an intersection with green paint. It highlights
Yeah,
the conflict zone
I like that.
for turning
When you were
vehicles.
looking at that other one, I was wondering about that too. That
Yeah.
green just stops there. I don't know.
We'll still do this, but I don't think the concept of the enhanced corridor with like a lot of different treatments is survived very well.
Oh, has it?
Why not?
Well, we had an idea like downtown, like on San Francisco and Beaver. Some cities have put a green background on share lane markings to kind of make them more visible. And the new MUTCD explicitly says you can't do that. Like it goes out of its way to say you can't use that treatment. I I think what they kind of ruled on is they don't want green, they want green paint used in bike lanes. There's all kinds of places in METCD where you can add green paint in bike lanes now. And these are kind of federal guidelines for how to do signing and pavement markings. But because green is for bike lanes, they don't want green in a travel lane, even though it's a shared lane marking that bikes could use because it's a travel lane. They don't want, I'm guessing, but I think that's why.
Yeah, I don't want to confuse the.
Yeah. Then we kind of ran out of, like in San Francisco, we thought it would be nice to have a buffered bike lane, but we run out of space unless we're willing to make the lanes really narrow, eliminate parking. We had a bunch of places where we had two-stage left turn boxes, which we should talk about at some point as a future agenda item. Part of the idea was it helps cyclists make a left turn if you don't want to have to drift across traffic to make that left turn as a vehicle. And we only have a couple. I don't know that they're intuitive how they're used. And
They're not,
you tend to
they're
agree.
not used, except as bike boxes. That's my opinion, anyway.
So
From what I've seen.
our thought is always like, if something is not working well, like use it more.
Put it in more places.
Yeah, seriously, no, if they were more widespread and we gave people more direction on how to use them, would they become that help? But we were having a hard time finding places where they would work, and so they were kind of taken out ultimately. There's only like a couple intersections left.
Are bike boxes an option? Because we talked about this briefly in another meeting, like where you can move into the front of the through traffic lane
Yeah,
as a bike.
I had that today. Right, I had to wait for
Or
$8
just-
or whatever.
In general, like when you're in a bike lane.
They are.
Yeah, and you come up to an intersection, it's safer if you're either in front of the car. If you're parallel to a car, you're at the greatest chance, Martin, of getting right hooked. And if you're either in front or behind it, you're gonna be safer through the intersection from bike lane to bike lane. So is that possible?
It is, we had one specific place in mind where that, I think that would be helpful. We haven't really thought about other places where that might be like a good application, but we could do that.
I feel like especially if you're moving from a bike lane to a share road, they're helpful. Like San Francisco would be one where you effectively have to do that anyway.
That was where we wanted to use it.
Yeah, okay.
The challenge was on Northmont San Francisco, but the challenge was getting a bike lane to it. And I don't think they work if you don't have a bike lane that gets to it. You don't have any way to get past traffic really without
Sure.
sidewalk or lane splitting.
Then they have to park that farther back in that bike box, right? I'm just looking at the photo now, right?
Yeah, the idea is like you have a green spot, as far as I understand, Martin obviously knows better, but you have like a space up front where bicycles are allowed to be and cars are not allowed to be. So all the cars are behind you and all the bikes are at the front. So you go through the intersection first.
I've also seen it if you want to make a left turn, you you can move all the way to the left turn lane and then make a left turn. That makes sense.
Sometimes they go across both lanes.
Yeah, so you can,
Like on San Francisco, if they went across the whole road, you can make a left turn from that bike box as well, from the front of the line. That was generally it. I did want to talk, and we can talk about this at some point, but where we've had barriers along Butler in the past, they've added kind of a double stripe. And my first reaction to it was I wasn't like really a big fan of it. It's just like two stripes. It's not a true buffer. Like it just adds a little bit. But I wonder in places where we have room for this, but not a true buffer, if we might think about this as a treatment option. Is it better than a single stripe? I guess would be the question.
100%, in my opinion. Me too. I think so too.
Okay, good to know.
And I want to say, and I found the double line more beneficial when clean than the dirt road of the barriers. Because there's so much, like Butler, there's on those ones that still have the barriers, there's so much dirt, glass and other stuff in there that hinders abilities that I think that the double line, since they clean where that double line is,
it doesn't preclude sweeping or snow removal or any of the other normal operations for a road.
And my opinion has changed because I had originally said, and what it also allows is it allows you to leave. So when
Yeah.
someone
Exit the
puts
lane.
their trash cans in the middle of there and you're stuck in that box and can't get out.
Yeah, similar to a buffer. Okay, that's good to know. I appreciate that information. At some point, we have kind of a permanent solution for Butler to replace the barriers. We really don't for Beaver. And Beaver's a little bit tougher, but at some point, maybe we'll come back and think about different options for that whole corridor. And I would tend to think of those. And there's not many barriers remaining. I'm not sure what their future is, but we might plan for a post-barrier Beaver Street.
Was Beaver one of those roads on the corridors? Like the bike corridor?
It was, yeah,
Got it,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Is there any way to have that like the downhill, like you were saying, a Beaver shared share? Because it merges into one eventually, but like it's like almost better
Yeah.
to not merge.
That's
into
what I
that.
do. Yeah, I do the whole lane.
Yeah.
Starting at the
You're
top of the
going
hill.
faster.
Yeah.
I think that bike lane could end above the church.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's a big hill there and because it's challenging to, like, you want to be in the bike lane and then you have to like get across the intersection to get in a place where you're using the shared lane markings. And you can really do that sooner because of that hill. And you ought to do that sooner because of that hill. Yeah.
I agree.
As it is, yeah, if you're in that barriered area,
Yeah.
constantly looking over my shoulder. Walk in.
Right. And then you kind of have to, like, are you lucky or not in that like, there's a gap in traffic?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or are you at the point where you're going to merge over?
Especially by like the hospital and by the bashes. Yeah,
That's another place, right? Exactly.
yeah, I always take the lane there.
That's good. That's smart.
Yeah, it's safer.
Yeah.
And I'm going like 30 anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's a kind of a principle that, not everybody who's starting out is comfortable taking the lane, but as you get experience and learn kind of what kind of riding behavior is safe, you're more likely to take the lane. But and people may not feel that's a great level of accommodation for bicyclists, but I think if we had like a combination of things, so uphill from that, there's a good level of accommodation, or other streets, there's a good level of accommodation, that they're more likely to be accepting of places where it's not ideal.
And for me, I feel like I like prefer to take the lane, but I just like when there's signs so that the cars know, like, it's okay for me to be here.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. They really do make a difference. I think that Cheryl sticker really does. They're not happy about it, but
I think they're happier about it though. If they think that you don't belong there, then I think they're more aggressive towards you.
That's all I had for that item.
On the bike ways plan, or was that the site? That was the first one last, right?
Yeah, the only thing, I included some information on, different crossing types. I guess I didn't throw it in here, but it was really for Sam, and I wanted to show her the toucans and the bike hawks. We'll bring that back to a future meeting and talk about this.
Toucan and a bike hawk.
Toucan and the bike hawk.
Do you know what I felt like worked really well was at the end of our meetings, if we kind of brainstorm some agenda items for next time? Is there anything you guys want to throw on the agenda for next time?
One question about how the agendas are made.
They're
That
typed.
question, I guess.
Word with an app.
How's the sausage made?
You don't know.
My understanding is we can kind of decide what is on the agenda to a certain extent, right?
Yes. In an ideal world, we have the active transportation master plan, and it
Yeah.
gives us a whole bunch of strategies to do, and including priorities.
Mhm.
And so I think that should help guide what we talk about. Like, are we making progress on those priorities? I love to talk about all kinds of different things, but we probably need to be strategic about how, what we move forward. And are kind of deliberate in making sure that we're making progress.
So maybe like 70% progress and 30% frivolity.
Yeah. And 50% things that other people bring to us, like things that just come up.
Sure.
Like next month, we're gonna have a presentation on the regional plan update.
Nice.
So, right, yeah. So that's 150%.
That's why we go to 6:30.
However, as Daniel said, at the end of the meeting, like we have an item here for items for next meeting. So if there are things that you want to talk about, this is when we bring them up. We can certainly do that. We don't have to do that regimented. It's just a question of our time, Sure.
And I think, 2 meetings ago, we'd still talked about like bike parking and like, right, isn't that still an agenda item? I don't know. I guess I was wondering,
Well, we fixed it with the,
it's done? Sweet. We can mark
we
that.
got 24 new spots.
Plus 24.
I
Yeah.
think that was one, yeah, there was I can't remember what meeting that was, August maybe, where we discussed several potential future.
Right. Trying to,
Yeah.
I think we ended the last little hour with some attainable things, right? Were we gonna, I don't know.
Yeah, we can definitely, can we just add that one agenda item, bike parking?
Sure.
I'm also wondering, because city's budget, it needs to be finalized by January, right? That's when like you would propose changes to like the bicycle budget. in
Yes.
January. Like, I wonder if it's worth discussing your budget, or like, I don't know if you want to open that up to us, but I'm just thinking of like, you're adding all this green paint. So like, does the maintenance budget need to increase to maintain these things? Or like if there's I don't know. But I'm just thinking if that could be timely to get
Yes.
feedback.
It is timely, so that it's on the capital planning process. Every year, the city adopts a 5-year capital plan. The first year is our budget. This is for capital projects, but less so for maintenance or for, operations or for how the department runs or whatever. So it's a 5-year plan. The first year is the budget. The next 4 years are kind of for planning. We update it every year. We typically talk about it at this committee, like we've reviewed priorities before, and so we typically bring, here's how those priorities kind of play out in a 5-year capital plan. Does that look reasonable? What we're working on, what planning to work on. So we'll do that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good meeting, next meeting. So we got, the regional plan, we got the budget, we got the bike parking.
Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be a whole agenda item, but I'm still, because I don't know if it's a priority or not, but I would still like some clarification on the tactical urbanism portion of the active transportation master plan. And there's like 1 page on it. And there's nothing about it. It just says it's a thing. I know the boundaries are, well, yeah.
Acknowledge that people do this sort of thing.
That's the acknowledgement, okay.
It's an interesting thing to think about, especially in the context of the capital plan.
I think especially this, sorry, temporary, the
Yeah.
idea of more temporary things and like piloting this stuff out and then actually putting in the capital plan. Also tactical.
I just think it sounds cool, tactical.
Yeah. Sounds slightly bluer than
It feels like the sort of thing that you go to, like Home Depot with a burner phone and a phony ID
Yeah,
and stuff, and then like do it between midnight on Friday
and the
and
bed shower.
6 a.m. on Saturday morning. Yeah.
Or during the day at a high of its best.
Video flag goes.
Totally in the other direction. Tend to be totally legit.
Act like you belong.
So they're pretty close to opening up that new transportation depot to downtown.
Still on
When's
track
the-
for May.
For May?
Yeah.
Awesome. It's beautiful looking. It looks very state of the art and modern and what?
Ever, yeah. There's a community room.
Sounds appropriate.
Completely changes the nature of your commute, doesn't it?
And then go to Mother Road.
We need some of those tunnels finished first.
What's the bike parking there?
I could share some more. Yeah, so yeah, Merton did ask if there's gonna be bike lockers.
Right.
There are not gonna be bike lockers.
Well,
But there is quite a bit of bike parking. It could be added later. I'm not entirely sure why that was removed. I believe it was due to space, but could always add
I
that.
mean, there's a follow-up question. Even if there were bike lockers at the DCC, does that like serve Amtrak if you're going up?
I feel like it'd be more of like an in the know thing, because it is decent, like from where our building, I looked on the map, it's like probably half mile, I would think.
I mean, I think that parking lot is like overnight, you can get overnight parking permits for your vehicle if you're taking Amtrak.
I mean, I really feel like Amtrak should add some bike lockers, like just more direct. I think even if it was at DCC, the majority of people wouldn't know they were there and use them.
I would use it at Amtrak for sure.
Yeah.
Would you use it if it were at the DCC, if you were taking it?
I would, but I would know about it.
Right. I think the average person would
Probably.
know about it.
Or if you're bringing your bike on Amtrak, which I've done, and then hanging out in a place, it'd be nice to have them at Amtrak if you're coming from out of town.
It's still pretty easy to do on Amtrak, to take your bike.
Medium.
Medium.
You put it in a box. Then you take it out of the box.
Compared to flying with a bike,
Yeah,
it's a breeze.
yeah, if you're making connections, then it's a little harder because, for instance, if you like take Amtrak to LA and then you get on a more local train, you have to reassemble your bike to bring it onto the train instead of it being in with luggage storage. So if you have a tight connection, I've had problems.
What do you do with the box?
I just gave it to the Amtrak people and they recycled it, I think, or threw it
What do you
away.
do on the
I
way
don't know.
I'm just
I think I bought another
Okay.
bike box.
It's complicated.
Yeah, if you had your own travel case, you know, if you're serious and had your own travel case, then you'd be golden.
Collapsible travel case.
People have them.
In the old days, Annandale had cardboard boxes that were like travel cases. It had like a bottom and a top, and it was like deep. I mean, they were the best. They were way better than any other bike boxes. But I don't know if they still do that.
I know
For cardboard thing.
some Amtrak lines, not the Southwest Chief, but they're increasing like, the ones that allow you to take your bike on board have increased like the tire size that you can bring on board.
Right.
Which is pretty sweet. Doesn't help us, but I think some lines on the East Coast,
That's another,
because it was limited at 2, I think, right, mountain bikes.
yeah, that's another.
That's like a petition from Bike Packing Roads, just based out of Prescott. Pretty cool.
It's started out at Prescott, but yet the Flagstaff line does not.
No. But it's a nonprofit nationwide. But yeah, how do we get Amtrak to put in bike lockers?
Buy them and install them. It's easy. Don't tell them.
Yeah.
Anything else for the good of the order? I call it 8 minutes early. Good with that?
22 minutes late.
Does anyone talk?
22 minutes late. I thought we went to 6:30.
I think it's going on right now.
Yeah,
Rip
I got an
Diary.
invite to be.
Oh, yeah, you should participate.
I did.
Good, good. Yeah, it's random.
Is your,
Yeah.
because the week already, have you done your week or is it coming?
No, I haven't done it yet. Yeah, it's coming up.
The trip diaries.
What's your day?
Over 9th. When I'm
Next
checking.
week. Next
Yeah.
week is a week, yeah. So you're Wednesday.
Exciting times.
I went to the store.
Yep.
and
Yeah, I'll just bike everywhere and be like,
Like
this
to
is an
go there.
average day for me.
I went to work.
I mean, if you want to take the bus one day, so it's fine.
I did unfortunately say that I mostly take it when it's snowing, so I'm sorry.
That's fair.
Going,
So you
going?
tried to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah. All right,
6:24.
meeting's adjourned. Thank you, guys.
And the request.
Thank you. Oh, did we start? Oh, we did start, okay.
That would be terrible.
Thank